Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2026. I hope you guys are all having a great start to your year. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Tydro, but most specifically, I'll be going over what Tydro is, why it's important, and then I'm going to go over what I think the valuation of the Ink Chain token could be. And then finally, I'll go over how I'm personally farming it and maybe some just suggestions on how you can farm Tydro and the Ink token as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just get started. This is the main homepage for Tydro. Tydro essentially is a money market on the Ink chain. Now, Ink chain is Kraken's layer 2 on the Ethereum network. So you can think of the Ink chain sort of being like Kraken's version or their competition to the base chain, which is Coinbase's layer 2 on the Ethereum blockchain. Now, Tydro is a money market, so you can think of Tydro as being kind of like an Aave, where you can deposit assets as collateral and then you can borrow assets from them. But not only is it like Aave, it actually is Aave. It's the white label deployment of Aave v3 on the Ink chain. Now, so it's powered by the Aave infrastructure. It's the exact same code of Aave, but the only difference is that this Tydro application now has Kraken Ink incentives built into it, whereas the normal Aave application does not. And so if you were to connect your browser wallet to this Tydro application, your browser wallet actually thinks and says that it's being connected to Aave. So you can think of Tydro and Aave being essentially like the exact same thing. So as a recap, it's essentially just like Aave. You can deposit assets, you can supply assets, you can earn the supply APY. And then you can also borrow assets against your collateral, and you'll be paying this borrowed variable APY rate on the right-hand side. Now, why is Tydro important? Or I guess maybe more importantly, why is the Kraken Layer 2 important? And the Kraken Layer 2 is important for, I guess, a number of reasons, but maybe the most important thing coming here in 2026 is Kraken's IPO. So just doing a quick search of Kraken's IPO, you can see that Kraken is pursuing an IPO um, like reportedly in the first half of 2026. So they've already done all the filing of all the paperwork with the SEC, and so they are projecting to IPO in the first half of 2026. But not only are they doing that, but a lot of investor sentiment is pretty high for this IPO. You can see that this article right here by CNBC, they're filing for an IPO following their $800 million funding raise. And then over here, Fortune is saying that they're pushing towards the IPO finish line. And then over here, six blockbuster crypto IPOs to watch in 2026, with Kraken kind of being in the middle of this image over here on the right-hand side. So Kraken is looking to IPO in 2026, and therefore there's going to be a lot of attention on Kraken. Here in the United States, investors really only had one centralized exchange that was public that they could invest in and purchase shares of, that company being Coinbase. So Kraken is going to be the second public centralized crypto exchange in the United States, and that's a pretty big deal. And so, kind of with this momentum of their IPO in 2026, I do think it's important to, pay attention to what they're building on chain, as that will likely kind of have a lot of mind share and attention heading into the IPO. And that's why you should be paying attention to the Ink chain and subsequently the Ink token, which could be pretty valuable when it does go live. And then another reason why you should be paying attention to the Ink chain and more specifically Tydro is because if you were to interact and use the Tydro application, they are incentivizing you to essentially supply assets on Tydro. So you can see here that if you were to deposit USDT, they would be or you would be earning a kind of 1% APY on your USDT. But in addition to that, they're also giving you almost 6% APY in the Ink token. Okay, and it's going to be distributed through Merkle. And so this definitely adds to the yield and makes it more worth your time in deploying capital on the Ink chain. Now, if you were to look at the top right over here, they have this little button you can click, And you can kind of mess around with the valuations of what you think the ink token could be worth. So at a $2 valuation, this manipulates the APYs below. So this essentially says that if you were to deposit USDT on Tydro, you'll be making what, about 13% APY. The same thing can be said for USDC, where you'll be earning roughly 22% APY if you're assuming a $2 valuation of the ink token. And of course, you can always change this number to play around with it to see what the potential valuation would be with various different numbers. Okay, so with that being said, I think it's important to at least have some sort of ballpark kind of figure into what the ink token could be worth upon launching. Obviously, nobody really knows. I have no idea. Even the founder of Kraken has no idea. But if you're going to be using this and spending your time moving assets over to the ink chain and then deploying it on Tydro, I do think it's important to at least have some sort of kind of guideline or ballpark figure of what it could be worth. And so I think the best way of looking at it is maybe looking at some sort of comps. Over here, I'm on DeFi Llama, and I have a kind of view of all of the blockchains or all the major blockchains, and they're sorted from highest to lowest in TVL. So obviously, Ethereum is number one. There's about $73 billion in TVL. But let's take a look at where InkChain is on this list. So InkChain is number 14. They have 41 applications, and the TVL is about $500,000. And I think it's important here to kind of look at comps in terms of what protocols or what other centralized exchanges are on this list that have a close to $500,000 TVL. And just looking at this list and scanning it, I think the closest one to that is maybe Kronos. Kronos is the native token for crypto.com. And so this makes sense that their Kronos token could be kind of similar to Kraken's Ink token since they're both centralized exchanges and they both have their own token. Or rather, Ink will eventually have their own token. So having said that, Kronos's TVL is $387 million. And let's see what their market cap is on CoinGecko. So Kronos' token is the Crow token, and over here it's number 41 on the list. Their market cap is what, about $3.8 billion, with their FDV being close to $10 billion. Okay, so this gives us some sort of benchmark of maybe what we can expect from the Ink chain. So using these valuations, let's plug that in to Tydro to see what the yields could possibly look like if the market cap and the FDV kind of matched the same numbers as Kronos. So right here, we're estimating what, a $9.8 billion FDV, I believe. Yeah, $9.8 billion FDV. So that means that this Ink chain token would be worth roughly $9.8. I know that this is crazy math, all right? So bear with me. This implies that the APY for depositing USDT could be what, maybe 75%. By depositing your Kraken wrapped Bitcoin, you could be earning 15%. If you deposit your USDC, you could be earning what, 151% APY. So that's pretty insane, okay? And obviously, I don't know if the Ink token is actually going to be worth close to $10. Maybe like a more realistic number could be maybe $3 billion valuation. And but even so, the APY here is pretty high. And not only is the APY high, but we're also kind of in a bear market right now, which means that the DeFi yield farming opportunities right now are pretty sparse. And so if I could, with relative confidence, get about 18, 19% APY on my stable coins, I think this is a super solid suggestion and a great option for farming. Now, with that being said, what are some ways that you can farm volume on Tydro? Well, number one is if you're currently using Aave, you can just bridge your assets over from Aave to the Ink chain. Now, the easiest way of getting onto the Ink chain is by using the Kraken centralized exchange. You can send your assets to your Kraken account and then withdraw them onto the Ink chain. And then all your assets will be already bridged over to the Ink chain, including your Bitcoin, which will become this KBTC. which is essentially just Kraken's wrapped version of Bitcoin. So if you have Bitcoin, you can wrap it on the Kraken blockchain and then farm yield on Tydro. Same for all your other assets, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's stablecoins, etc. Now, the second thing you can do is you can deposit these assets like stablecoins, Bitcoin, Ethereum onto Tydro, and then you can borrow stablecoins against them. So obviously you'll be paying this borrow APY, which is maybe 2.6% if it's USDT. And then if it's USDC, you'll be borrowing close to 3%. So you can borrow stablecoins and then deposit those stablecoins back onto Tydro, earning this supply APY. And then from there, it'll increase your collateral level where you can borrow more stable coins again at this lower borrow APY to then deposit again to achieve and to earn this supply APY. So you're kind of like looping the yield around and around. And there's no real threat of liquidation because you're borrowing stable coins and you're supplying stable coins. It's like a one-to-one value. And so there's no real risk of getting liquidated in that sense. That's strategy number two. And then strategy number three isn't really a strategy. It's more sort of just like playing the numbers over here. So what you can do is look at the various stablecoins over here. Obviously, this USDG stablecoin has the highest yield by quite a large margin. So this is what, maybe 25% APY, whereas this one is paying close to 20% APY. So that's a pretty significant difference. And so if you're comfortable holding USDG, if you have any stablecoins on the Ink chain, you can just swap them into USDG and then deposit them here on Tydro to earn a much higher yield. Now, keep in mind that you cannot use USDG for collateral. They will not allow this to be a collateral asset for whatever reason, so you can't borrow against this. But it does pay a very high APY, so if you are willing to swap into it, it could be worth it. And I think USDG is overall a very safe asset. So USDG is backed by Paxos, and they are a US regulated firm, and they carry cash and cash equivalents on a one-to-one basis with all of their USDG tokens. So everything that they have on the blockchain is backed one-to-one in their reserves. So it should be relatively risk-free. All right, so that's pretty much my wrap up here on Tydro. I do think this is one of the best farming opportunities in crypto right now. Look, bear markets suck. Like I know this is my third bear market that I'm going through, and I do think that for people who are patient and who still pay attention during the bear market and do as much farming as possible, I think these people will be rewarded down the line whenever these ink tokens go live. And again, we don't really know what they're going to be worth, but imagine, a year from now or 6 months from now, logging into your account and seeing these ink tokens in your account being worth somewhere between $3 to $10. I think you might end up being very happy and glad that you spent the time bridging your assets over here to the ink chain. All right, that's pretty much all I have for this video. Again, please take those valuation numbers that I shared with a massive grain of salt. I have no idea what the valuation of the tokens will be when the airdrop does happen. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in for this video. I hope you all have a terrific 2026. I'll see you all next time.